basically, the high-risk mortgage team, aka subprime, at Bank of America, met in the coffee queue the people who were trying to work out how to grow this magic trick of high interest rate asset-backed securities. And they met in the coffee queue and they said, hey, we need new people to generate high interest rate borrowing, and you have them. Subprime was born. Now, unlike the dot-com crash, which only wiped out stupid investors who were buying companies that were selling free software, remember that, free software, Linux, 3 billion was the biggest IPO of a Linux company. Now that can only wipe out people who've done stupid things like buy the shares at their top on their credit card or ridiculous stuff like that. But if you lend money to millions of people who are poor at high interest rates who can never afford to pay it back, that creates a bigger problem, a system-wide problem, and we know that's exactly what it did. I went to Detroit, Michigan last year. Michigan, yes, so you say, isn't it? By 2004, so only 3 years into the asset-backed securities craze, subprime, by 2004, 75% of all new mortgages in that city were subprime mortgages. We now know most of these mortgages were missold. A lot of the people who could actually get a mortgage could have got a decent ordinary mortgage, but the American and latterly some European countries, including parts of the British market, were selling these mortgages because they wanted the high interest rates. So they missold them. By 2007, 65,000 homes in Detroit had been foreclosed. So they've been the proceedings have been started to reclaim them because the people who bought them couldn't pay them back. And I've been there, and The Wire is a good series, and it about approximates to what it is like in downtown. Why would you buy any of these places? Even when, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, gradually these neighbourhoods, which nearly all now are composed of owner-occupied shacks, square shacks with a tiny garden, are just being bombed out, looted and destroyed because people can't pay their mortgage, they leave, they trash the building and set fire to it. The Americans call it snaggletooth development because if you look at it from above, it's like a champ's teeth that have been knocked out. Every 3 or 4 spaces along the road just consist of derelict or destroyed housing. And yet they still lent into there because they were just basically addicted to this form of lending. The Economist magazine in 2002 famously had a front page called The Houses That Saved the World, because what they worked out quite rightly was that when the dot-com crash collapsed, coming on top of that 9/11, there could have been quite a serious recession. But as a matter of policy, not an accident, not some kind of objectified economic process, but as a matter of policy, the American government and the British government encouraged people to put money into housing. Housing rose in value, people took the money out, used their houses as ATMs, the mortgage withdrawal, the equity withdrawal loan, so that houses save the world. They create the illusion, and in fact if something that lasts 5 or 6 years is not an illusion, it's real but it's temporary, of prosperity. I think if you were rewriting that headline today, you would rewrite it, the poor people who saved Wall Street. Because it was the poor of America who saved Wall Street. And in fact, not just saved them, they boosted their profits to a height because the subprime stroke asset-backed securities bubble was far bigger than dot-com. They boosted profits massively. The last 6 years have been the years when these guys really did get rich. The level and size of investment bank wealth and profit was nowhere near in 2001 what it was in 2006 on the eve of the crash. So what happens? You lend money, people can't pay it back, they leave their houses and trash them. That's the rate of growth of US house prices over the period we're talking about. It grows by between 15 and 20% a year for the best part of the decade, and then it turns down. Instead of growing, it falls. And there, you've got a problem. Now, there's a famous episode of The Simpsons where Krusty the Clown has made a terrible mistake. he bets that the Russians are going to win all the medals in the 1980 Olympics, and he offers a free burger for every time the Americans win a gold medal. Okay, or thousands of free burgers. And then, like, just as he goes on the TV and says this, the Russians pull out because of the boycott, because of Afghanistan. And Krusty, in the episode, goes on TV to try and countermand this offer. And he's already been drinking, and he's hitting the cigarettes, and he's boozed up. And he goes on TV and he says, quotes, "You people are pigs. From now on, I'm going to spit personally in every 50th burger." And Homer Simpson, watching at home, looks at it and goes, "I like those odds." And as long as it was the case that only maybe 1 in 50 mortgages would have gone bad, the same thing would have been true. These are not bad odds. You can live with this. But what we worked out was that, as I won't go into the detail because you probably read it all, that the way they had sliced and diced this new kind of investment was that you didn't just buy the vanilla product. They sliced and diced it up into what were called structured investments, structured finance products, and instead of it being 1 in 50 burgers, basically the effect was that somebody had spat into the vat of mince. That's the best analogy I can give you. This, horrible though it is to think. And therefore, suddenly, unlike Homer, nobody wanted the burgers anymore. This is what happened on August the 9th, 2007. A year before the event we now call the credit crunch. I call it the beginning of the credit freeze. It was already looking bad. Some of these asset bubbles had turned down. All the investment products based on this crazy mortgage lending now looked impossible to value. And on that day in the afternoon, like there's something happening here, the mobile phones and Blackberries of rich people all across the world, bankers, started to go off. They were all on holiday and people said, shit, some of the things we have based our entire business on are now impossible to value. And as the Bank of France spokesman, they were the first person to come out with this, added, and we don't know why. Now this is a big problem. It means suddenly nobody wants to lend to anybody else. And you know the story, if you've been following the news, what happens then, and I will rush through this. From 2007, August 2007, you get what we called at the time the credit crunch. It was a credit shortage, a credit freeze. All these things started to, basically fear stalked the market. And the number of these new types of investment, the new asset-backed security issuance basically halved. But it carried on. It carried on. Nobody knew which investment banks were the most exposed because it's all sliced and diced. And then we found out, Bear Stearns. Bear Stearns in March started to go really wrong. Or rather, it started to go wrong sometime before. Let me tell you the story of James Kane, the chief executive and chairman of Bear. Well, in 1969, he's a great salesman of scrap metal and photocopiers. And in his spare time, he's a bridge player for money. They call it a bridge bum in America. And fellow bridge bum, Hank Ace Greenberg, there's a lot of Greenbergs in my book. It's a coincidence. So Hank Greenberg is the boss of Bear Stearns, and he meets Jimmy at a bridge tournament and he recruits him. Come and be a salesman. It's a rags to riches story. By the mid-90s, Jimmy is boss of Bear Stearns. By 2007, Jimmy Kane is chief executive chairman, and he is 72 years old. And somebody comes up to him and says, Jimmy, 2 of our hedge funds are in trouble because of all this subprime stuff. It's gone bad. We don't quite know how bad, but we're thinking maybe £2-3 billion we're up for grabs here. So Jimmy, at this point, goes to Nashville to a bridge tournament. Being 72 years old, he has resisted email and mobile phones, so he's out of contact. But he runs the bank.